Hello,
Hello.
Joshua.
Yes, this is Dr. Peterson. How are you?
I'm well. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Where are you?
I'm in Oklahoma City.
Ah, I don't think I've talked to anybody from Oklahoma City yet.
Oh, it's good to see you.
Yeah, well, good to see you too. What do you do in Oklahoma?
Well, I'm in the aviation field and I work for a company called Radial Engines Limited, and we repair and overhaul and restore aircraft engines. So I get to paint them and maintain them or restore them to their original
So are you
appearance.
working? Are you working on like vintage aircraft, or does it run the gamut?
It's just the aircraft, yeah, vintage aircraft engines. So they most of the time will go on vintage aircrafts that private owners use for hobbies
Right.
or for people who fly in aquatic airplanes. So
Uh
yeah.
huh. I had the opportunity to fly in a God. It was a World War II vintage flying boat
Hmm.
last year. Yeah, that was really something. It
Yeah.
was the takeoff and landing was really quite exciting and
Wow,
adventurous.
that's awesome.
Noisy, that's
Yeah,
for
they're
sure.
they're very loud engines.
Yeah. But it was quite the beast, that thing. And it's amazing they can still run. I mean, that's what. How long is that now? 70 years ago. That
Yeah,
thing is still.
some of the parts we work with are over 70 years old and they're still fresh in the box, like they've never been actually used before because they were just surplus from the war times. So yeah,
Mm,
pretty
mm.
strange.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So what's your educational background? How did you get into that?
Well, it doesn't really have anything to do with my education. I'm just sort of a jack of all trades, and I've jumped from many different industries. But my background is in art, and so that's sort of what I've been trying to stay in, roughly, just working in painting, and I've dabbled in brewing, and uh, yeah. So that's I just kind of all over the place, I guess.
Is this a good job?
Yeah, it's a good job, and I'm actually about to move to Hawaii for
Oh, wow, that's a change.
yeah. My wife got a job there, and yeah, so it's a lot different than Oklahoma, but we're excited about this sort of new turning of the leaf. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I bet.
yeah, maybe I'll get
Yeah.
back into the brewing because there's some breweries over there. I'm hoping to get into kayak charter fishing. So I really like fishing as well. So that's
Hmm. Well, both of those things should be reasonably popular in Hawaii, you'd think, given the tourist economy.
oh yeah, I would think so.
When
Yeah,
are you moving to Hawaii?
in 1 month we just sold our house. We're gonna
Ah,
actually travel for a month before actually moving. So planning on traveling through Colorado and Arizona, visiting friends, and then maybe visiting camping in some national parks and forests. So maybe
well,
coming up to Toronto. Who knows? We're just sort
that
of
sounds
open.
exciting.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, hell, you got lots of adventures in front of you in the next while.
yeah.
How
We're
much time have you spent in Hawaii? Do you know it?
I don't know it well. We've spent 2 weeks there visiting friends who moved there about 3 years ago, and they enjoyed it enough to have stayed this long. And so we're just like excited to try something. It is this. It's a sort of a uprooting of a home that we've been in for about 3 years, but we're excited to see what a new adventure holds, and it's kind of our last opportunity to do anything real extreme like this because we have no children. So
Uh-huh.
uh,
Right.
yeah,
So this is your pre-child
yes,
pre-child adventure.
yeah, I guess so. And we do plan on having children there eventually, so that might be something that causes us to move back to closer to family eventually. But uh,
What
yeah,
does your wife do?
she's a PA. Yeah, and dermatology specifically. So
I see. I
yeah.
see. And so there was a good opportunity that beckoned from Hawaii.
Yeah, yeah, it did, and yeah, I'm gonna try to do some sort of artistic work there if I possibly can. I don't know. We'll see what it holds.
Yeah, well, it's a hard road to hoe to monetize artistic productivity.
Yeah, no joke. Yeah, that's for sure. Well, I've been listening to your biblical lectures, and they have been quite the experience, to say the least. And
Yeah, well, that's how I feel about it.
well, then we have that in common. And I mean, ever since I think experienced you first on Joe Rogan, which was about 9 months ago. Now was the first episode you were on. I think I've probably listened to some content of yours at least once a day since then. So I have the ability to do that at work, and it's almost been like a hallucinogenic trip, if I can be honest. And you should be made.
Well, I think that that's a good comparison, actually.
Yeah.
Because that material, I mean, the archetypal material it's no joke, that stuff, man. When I first started encountering it, when I was in my 20s, like it altered my dreams,
Yes.
quite profoundly.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it's very profound stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
So why did you specifically use that comparison, do you think?
Well, I've had those experiences before. It's been about 10 years since I've had an induced hallucinogenic psychedelic experience, and that affected me profoundly in a similar way. If I could compare it, it's different, of course, but it has had actual similarities that I would say that are like, it's almost like a time, what's the word? Like a time distortion,
Yeah,
where
that's interesting.
I feel like I've experienced a very vast amount of time in a short period of time, or the other way around even, and so I don't know why that is, but
Well, I think that's actually an indication of reorientation at a very, very fundamental level. Jung thought that the collective unconscious was outside of time and space. I mean, that was one of his more radical claims. And there are technical reasons for giving some credence to that. I mean, in our normal day-to-day life, we sort of impose a strict temporal ordering on things, or even experience it that way. But there are elements of existence that sort of stand outside of that, and I think that you can experience reorganization at those levels.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And you get a sense of timelessness, and that sort of thing happens.
Yes.
So
yeah.
Even some of the neural circuitry of that is somewhat understood, because there are parts of your brain, like the amygdala, which deals with really profound emotional experiences, that seems to learn things outside of a temporal context, which sort of means that once that part of your brain learns something, you've basically learned it forever. It isn't modified by the specific context that obtains right here and now.
And as I'm hearing you talk right now, as much as I can, I've tried to pay close attention to the things you're saying, and I probably can understand 75 to 80% of it, and I know I can really understand it whenever it's inspiring me to have my own ideas while I'm hearing you say things, right?
Yeah,
and so
that's the right marker.
Yes, and so as I'm listening, it's generating other extremely profound ideas that I'm having, and then also hearing you, and I can do both of those things at the same time somehow, which is also
that's good.
Yeah, which is also like sort of what you would experience, I think, taking a hallucinogenic drug. But
you're attending with the part of you that's really primarily creative.
Yeah.
And that's a part that's really good at thinking laterally and simultaneously. So, yeah, that's very cool. That's very cool. I'm glad you appreciated the biblical lectures, because the Patreon support is in large part what made that possible, and it's going to make it continue, because I'm going to continue. I mean, that's one solid ambition that I have, come hell or high water, is I'm going to continue doing those lectures for as long as it's practically feasible. I'd like to get through the whole Bible if I could manage it.
I think that's incredible. I think that is just, like, I can't tell you how I feel so sympathetic to that because I was raised actually, hearing these stories through song and through teaching, and just going to church as a child, and they have not even nearly as significant of a meaning to me then they didn't as they do now, but just like looking back on them, so it's been profound to rediscover them, I guess.
Yeah, for me too. Well, and some of them I was quite familiar with. I'd done a lot of work on the early stories in Genesis before, but I hadn't really spent a lot of time on the Abrahamic stories, for example, and taking those apart has been unbelievably useful. I mean, my experience has been every time I hit one of those old stories, the really old stories, and really try to take it apart, the positive consequences are overwhelming. So, and I'm really looking forward to getting to the Exodus story because I know it pretty well, and I'm really looking forward to it. And it's a lengthy, detailed, profound story. So it should be really well.
Now I've heard you. I'm sorry. Well, I've heard you mention before that in your reading of Revelation, you think that there were most likely had to have been some use of hallucinogenic drug in the writings, and I've always sort of thought the same thing.
It's a psilocybin mushroom trip.
Or I think it would have to have been that John, the writer, was at least isolated enough, or had malnutrition. You're right, and so there's all of those things that play a factor, I think. But
it looks a lot like a psychedelic experience, man.
Right. What do you think?
There are other ways of bringing that about, so so it's very difficult to say.
What do you think about the Mosaic stories being having any effect of those things?
I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a really interesting book. You might want to take a look at it. It's kind of a cult classic. No one knew what the hell to do with it when it was first written. They kind of classified it with the hippie literature, but it's not a hippie book at all.
Mm-hmm.
And had it been written at any other time than the 1960s, it certainly wouldn't have been put into that category. Here, I'll type the name of it here into this chat box. I can't do it because I send you a request.
Maybe I called you. I don't remember.
Yeah, you might have.
I called you. But is it the?
It's called The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross.
Yes, I've heard of that one, so I'll remember.
Yeah, well, it's worth reading. I mean, it's one of those books you just don't know what to do with.
Right.
Because it makes a very strong case for the association between mushroom usage and early Christianity. And it was an impossible book for me to evaluate because a lot of it was based on psycholinguistic analysis of word similarity, and I'm no expert in that area, and you'd have to be quite an expert in order to evaluate it. But it's a very interesting book, and I can't help but think there's something to it because we also know perfectly well that the deeper shamanic traditions, which really aren't that far away from us, it's 10,000 years, which is in the rough ballpark of the sorts of things that were emerging in the Middle East. The shamanic tradition was grounded in psychedelic use. There's just no doubt about that. So there's some connection between the psychedelic experience and the religious narrative and the way that those things are twined together. Indisputably. The details, though, how are we going to know? Yeah. I read an interesting account once that claimed that what was in the Ark of the Covenant was a Amanita muscaria mixture. And that's actually, it's a credible theory because there's good evidence that it was Amanita muscaria use that was behind the motivation, or the revelatory experiences that generated the Bhagavad Gita, the Hindu writings. And that's well established. And so, the probability that the use of such things was limited to India is zero, especially because Amanita muscaria use was widespread across all of Siberia, for example.
Yeah, so, it grows everywhere, magically in your front yard.
Yeah, right. I mean, the theory is that what happened in India is that as India warmed up, the amanitas used to grow fairly high up in the mountains because they're basically temperate mushrooms. So you have to go up in the mountains to pick them. And got warm enough so that they just, the range disappeared.
Yeah,
that's why the knowledge of soma was lost.
My friend lives in Colorado, and he's been sending me pictures of them because they grow rampantly out there. So
yeah, has he ever tried them?
He hasn't. He's going to. We're studying that as best as we can. I don't know if I'm up for it, but he has tried.
It's a daunting prospect.
Yeah, he's my friend who we actually have tried the more standard psilocybin mushroom in the past with, and so.
And what was your experience? How would you characterize your psilocybin experiences? What have they done for you or to you?
Okay, it's hard to say long term, but as I was in them, I felt like I was embedded in a William Blake painting.
Yeah.
And I just distinctly remember that almost it was more of a feeling of being in one of his paintings. And at the time, I had no clue who even William Blake was, and I don't even know if I had seen the painting before, but I had probably encountered it somehow. And anyways, years after having the experience and studying more about William Blake, it's become more significant and meaningful exactly what that imagery is. But how it's affected me long term, it's hard to separate from, because it's hard to say exactly what of it is and what is something else. But
sure.
It's mostly positive. Let's just say that.
So did it change the way you looked at things? I mean, obviously the William Blake analogy is a profound one, but what about the way that you were oriented towards the world?
I don't even know if I was mature enough at the time to have had an earnest perspective of the world that I could compare it to. Right? Does that make any sense?
Right.
So,
yeah, sure.
So I wouldn't say that, but I wouldn't change it.
Yeah.
I don't have any regrets about it.
Fair enough. Yeah, well, I've talked to lots of people who've had mushroom experiences, and it's very rare to run across someone who regrets it or who says that the effect was anything other than positive, which is really, strange.
Yeah.
Remarkable and difficult to understand.
Well,
that's for sure.
In your clinical work, do you see there being any future for that? Not you as an individual, but I guess just on the whole. I mean,
yes, I would say the probability of that is extremely high. We're not at that point now, and probably won't be for I don't know. Who can guess about these things?
It's hard to say.
It wouldn't surprise me if it took another 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Because generally speaking, so they're starting to do serious work, scientific work on utilization of psilocybin, in particular at Johns Hopkins. And it usually takes 15 years for scientific research to sort of leak out into the general public. And that's just the knowledge, the practical application. That's a whole different issue. And I mean, the psychedelics face an uphill battle with regards to their utilization in psychiatric situations. I think partly because, even psychiatrists, generally speaking, are fairly conservative people. Because medical doctors are conservative people. Psychiatrists probably somewhat less so, but still conservative. I mean, psychedelics are, one thing that you could say about them certainly is that they're strange enough to put anyone on edge, much less a conservative person, because they're really fundamentally incomprehensible.
Mm-hmm.
So,
wow.
So it's difficult for people to get a handle on that.
For sure. I was listening to the second to last biblical lecture that you gave, and you brought up something that I had been thinking about quite a bit, about the tradition of circumcision. And
okay. So why did you have the opportunity to be giving that consideration?
Because I guess I've been thinking about it and how it's still a custom that we have as a culture. As a cult and as a culture, we make fun of other cultures who practice genital mutilation on children.
Right.
And so it seems ridiculous that we would overlook that we still carry on this tradition and claim it as some sort of hygienic routine when I know that has nothing to do with it.
Right.
And
yes.
What you were saying was that it has something to do with affecting a person where they're most affected, right? Which, to me, that made me think, well, this was like in terms of sacrifice, this was like the idea of sacrificing what's most important to us in a sexual way that we couldn't overcome in order to be able to be more productive somehow. Like,
yeah, it's definitely something.
Which
it's definitely something. Well, it's a funny thing too, because it's not like you can't see how these things are immediately relevant to the modern situation, because there's an endless number of young men who are addicted, for all intents and purposes, to pornography. And it's really not doing them any good. And, some sacrifice of that would be a really good idea. And I would say they all know it.
mm-hmm.
Now, it isn't obvious what you'd have to sacrifice in order to have enough, in order to develop sufficient commitment to stop doing that. So it's not like these are problems that we've solved permanently, even though people like to think that they are.
No, I don't see it as being a solution to anything, but just something so powerful that it at least has carried on a tradition that we see nothing about realistically is carrying on this far into our culture, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. It definitely begs the question: why does it have such longevity?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, once something gets established as a cultural norm, it gets difficult to move against it. But yeah.
Man, after hearing you say that and thinking of it in those terms, like I was, reminded of the New Testament counterpart to that, the circumcision of the heart. And I don't remember what book that was in, circumcision of the heart, but there's that's Romans 2:29. And I don't know if you were even thinking of that, or if you.
No, I wasn't.
That's part of
right now.
Yeah, that's part of the verse. Is it's about the circumcision of the heart, and so it was pretty transformative to think of it that way. As sacrificing something that is more than just our foreskin, but like something that's part of our being.
I didn't know that line. So that's great. That's great, because that's another bit of documentation of the fact that this becomes increasingly psychologized as it moves forward in time.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see I've been using this site called Bible Hub, which I referred to a couple of times in the lectures,
mm-hmm.
to investigate the realm of commentary surrounding these verses. Be interesting to see what the commentary on that line is.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if I can find it here. Yeah, so Matthew Henry says, true baptism is that of the heart by the washing of regeneration and the renewal of the Holy Ghost, bringing a spiritual frame of mind and a willing following of truth in its holy ways. Let us pray that we be made real Christians, not outwardly, but inwardly, in the heart and spirit, not in the letter. Yeah, so that's definitely a commentary.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Barnes says, the circumcision which is acceptable to God is what is attended to with holiness of heart, with the cutting off of sins, and with a pure life. The design of circumcision was to be a sign of separation from the pagan world and of consecration to the holy God. And this design implied the renunciation and forsaking of all sins, or the cutting off of everything that was offensive to God. This was a work especially of the heart. Yeah. I guess there's another, there's one in Deuteronomy 10:16 too, and that is, circumcise your hearts, therefore, and do not be stiff-necked any longer. So that's an injunction to the abandonment of arrogance. Very interesting.
It is interesting.
Well, it was really useful for you to tell me that, because I wasn't aware of that particular verse and that. Yeah, and then there's one from Jeremiah, which is a tougher one. Circumcise yourself to the Lord and take away the foreskins of your heart, ye men of Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem. Lest my fury come forth like fire and burn that none can quench it, because of the evils of your doings. That's a rough one.
Yeah, well, it said it explicitly there, the foreskin of the heart.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Great. Well, that is very interesting. I'm going to have to remember that, because maybe I can start the next lecture with some discussion of that. Hopefully I'll remember it.
That would be good, man.
Just
there's so many things that you've covered I've been like causing me to re-encounter the New Testament counterpart to them, which is like the hyperlinkage that you talk about of the whole text. And I just it keeps popping up, the New Testament counterpart to it, which is weird.
One of the things that I've found really surprising about this is the degree to which it reveals how not seriously the serious atheists have actually contended with the biblical writings. Because regardless of the metaphysics, the book is something absolutely staggeringly remarkable. And there's just no point in criticizing it casually. It's not the sort of thing to criticize casually. And if you're criticizing it casually, it means that your criticisms aren't worth the paper they're written on, because you're not getting to the heart of the matter.
Do you ever have dreams about having a debate with Richard Dawkins?
I have definitely thought about that. I guess the closest I got was my discussion with Sam Harris, although I think Dawkins would be more interesting.
Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah. Well, but the thing about Dawkins is that, see, there's something wrong with the way he approaches this, and I think it would make a discussion very, very difficult, because he obviously has something personal against the church. And maybe he has his reasons, like I can't help but think that he was molested when he was a kid, something like that, because he's so angry. And he really does it at the level of someone who's like an intelligent 13-year-old. He isn't using he's not making an Iron Man of the church. He's making a straw man of the church. And someone that smart shouldn't do that, because he doesn't have to.
Right, and it's no wonder that he would associate the entire establishment with what hurt him so badly, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And not be able to separate that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's something at the bottom of that, because, what Dawkins should do, if he's serious about what he's doing, is he should make the strongest possible case for the validity of what he's criticizing, and then win the argument, which is basically what Dostoevsky does, the reverse, basically, because he makes his atheists into pretty remarkable characters, and still has his heroes defeat their philosophy. But he doesn't do it by shrinking away. Quite the contrary. Dostoevsky's atheists are the sort of people you'd really respect if you ran across them in real life. So. Have you ever read Crime and Punishment or the Brothers Karamazov?
I've started the Brothers Karamazov, but not Crime and Punishment. No.
Yeah, well, given your interest, they really are something, those books, and they're really good to listen to on audio.
Yeah, that's what I've been trying to listen to, the Brothers Karamazov, just in pieces. But whenever I have time, I'll throw that on and listen to a section of it. So, yeah.
Well, I should go.
Okay.
Yes.
Well,
thank you for the information.
Yes, it's been great to talk to you. Let me know if you ever are of any need of any artwork or painting, and I would be happy to do any work for you pro bono. And
well, thank you. That's a very generous offer.
I think you should start an apparel line soon of some socks, some of your fancy socks, right?
Yeah. Somebody gave me some. I've been given some of those. Somebody gave me socks with lobsters on them.
Oh, that's so funny.
Hilarious. That was absolutely perfect, man.
Yeah, I've been working.
Somebody's made a T-shirt too that I saw the other day, which is wow.
I'm working on an image of you with some of those things, but
oh, that's very cool. Well, send it to me when you're done.
Oh, I will. I'd like to. Can I send it to a certain email?
I'll give you my email address.
Okay.
Okay, it's personal@jordanbpeterson.com.
Okay. I'll try not to abuse it too much.
Okay. I'm not too concerned about it.
All right.
So, good luck in Hawaii, eh?
Oh, thank you. It's good talking to you. And good luck on the rest. Yes, good luck on the rest of the biblical lectures. Looking forward to those.
Forward to it, man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Bye, Dr. Peterson.
Bye. Bye.
Yeah. Really good. As long as it all recorded.
Just got all your stuff in, right?